Twitch stream. Just going to make sure that we're on.
Oh yeah, host me as well. Why don't you? That'd be sick. Did it say get educated?
Oh, it's just a Twitch stream.
Jump onto your own stream and type in /host.
Yeah.
Anyone who's here right now, do that as well.
An ad, so you're definitely streaming. Okay, 1 second.
All right.
Chat.
I wonder if it'll. Oh, do you just have to do /h? It's host.
Yeah.
Definitely host. All right. Getting set up. Yay!
Perfect.
All
Yeah.
right. Fantastic. Okay, so you're hosting me now. Tanbu is now hosting you. Thank you. Hello. All right.
Okay, so what happened today was after.
Yes, this is Tanbu speaking right now. All right, introduce yourself. This is Tanbu. He's my bro. Literally.
I'm Tanbu. I studied physics for 3 years. I was unsuccessful in my studies. I am currently unemployed. I'm looking for a job. I'm completely unqualified, but I did read some books, and I'm part of a left-wing Japanese left-wing Discord full of people who are interested in Japanese culture.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the only thing you need to really only qualification you need.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I got so into it was because back in secondary school,
We were weeps.
yeah, we were weeps, and basically the thing is that I was thinking about if I was living in Japan, which political party would I vote for?
Oh,
And as I
you thought about this way back in secondary school.
yeah,
Okay.
because I was just thinking about shit,
Yeah.
just fantasizing.
Okay.
Like if I was in Japan, if I was living there, who do I give my vote for? And so I look at the LDP, and then I think the first reaction was like, okay, they're fine. They're called Liberal Democrats. But the second time I looked through, it was just incredibly vague what their policies were.
Yeah.
And then when I was in university, I was fully aware that the LDP was nothing liberal or democratic. But then the thing that was more worrying, okay, fine, the Liberal Democratic Party aren't liberal or democratic. That would be fine as long as there was an actual proper opposition party. But the DPJ, when I looked at their policies, they had none. They're just a Big Ten party with nothing. They have no ideology, nothing you can latch onto and say, yes, I'd like to vote for this. And then you also have the Communist Party, which are the only people with an actual left-wing perspective in the country. But that it takes the communists to be actual social democrats, which is also saying a lot. So even the left wing is more to the right of any other Western democracy. So that's the thing that's happening so that's the position I was. And then there's this awesome site called kanjidamage.com where it's teaching you all the Japanese kanji through different stupid mnemonics.
Yeah.
And then when I basically said on Twitter that I was frustrated, he said, hey, read this book called Enigma of Japanese Power. It just explains a whole lot. And then I know that this guy has, he lived in, he's Schultz. So
Yeah.
The owner of Kanji Damage, he had his own blog, and he made some political posts there, which I read a bit. So I was aware that he knew his stuff.
Yeah.
So when he recommended me this book, I bought it immediately, and it was so just amazing because he goes into this socio-economic and political explanation of
power structure.
Not just power culture, but what was interesting to me was obviously that power structure, but culture, how this affects Japanese culture, because that was the thing that I was most aware of, apart from the politics. So yeah, okay, the politics, but then how come? So if you have a Western country, if the husband isn't at home most of the time, the wife is going to complain, the family's going to complain. It's a natural familial problem, whereas it seems to be a natural expectation in Japanese middle class families. How is that tolerated? That the book even had answers for that, so not just the political power.
So yeah, the book you're talking about was The Enigma of Japanese Power
By Karel van Wolferen.
Karel van Wolferen.
Dr.
Is released in 1989.
89, yeah.
Okay.
And then I think the second edition was released in the edition I bought was released in 1990, so that was after the bubble burst.
Literally within a year.
And then like everyone started writing great reviews about this book in America because like
they
were trying to latch on to anything that was like
critical.
Somewhat like, because before that was I guess it wasn't that laser focused, because the other problem with Japanese studies is that because it's mostly funded by the Japanese government, you can have So, but Karel van Wolferen isn't in that academic circle.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so that's all background. Yeah, that's all background. And so, that's tanbu. I'm Tide Ocean. You know me from playing video games.
Yeah.
I also studied physics for 3 years. I was unsuccessful in that. Unfortunately, I did not develop an interest in Japanese culture. I'm just
at least you're becoming a bit more leftist now. So.
Good. I was never not leftist. No. You keep thinking I'm like totally like right wing because I go on Discord.
No, I'm not saying that, but like you had like
I've been disinterested from politics, but never in the fucking South Park kind of way.
Yeah, no, I totally
never been that way.
It's just that.
But anyway, yeah. Let's
stick to it.
Let's stick to the discussion. So, you were at a talk hosted by
basically the reason why I was interested in this because it's literally called the state of the Japanese state. And that's what I know about.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other reason is that book I'm reading, where it's like, oh, so much stuff. It's obviously was written before the bubble burst.
Yeah, 30 years ago. 30 years ago.
And then like, it's not just like, it's not that it's just 30 years old, but it was before the bubble burst. But then obviously, then you have like all this information that I need to catch up with.
Yeah.
So that's why I was interested in this talk. So if I could glean some information regarding Japan. So
all right.
So the people who are so this talk was basically centered around this Australian professor's new work.
All right. So and he's called Professor Gavan McCormack.
Gavan McCormack. So you can see the cover of that book on the stream right now.
Yeah. I'll just bring it up for our sake. Yeah.
Gavan McCormack. The State of Japanese State, Contest, Identity, Direction, Role.
All right.
And then also next to him was Professor Arthur Stockwin, who was I'll get to him later, but he was there to support him. Not actually support him, actually to offer a different perspective, but they're tight.
Okay, yeah,
they're fam. Yeah. So McCormack's main areas of study is Okinawa and the Japanese state, but he's also writing books about Korea and also Japanese-Korean relations. I also noted this down. He also looks a bit like Chief Aramaki from Ghost in So he has got that bald head, like hair. His hair isn't that far up, but he also got the goatee as well. And I was like,
so white.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No. And he edits the Asia Pacific Journal Japan Focus. Right. So
what's that?
It's a journal about Japanese studies.
Oh, like so that's where he's publishing, or
he's an editor.
Oh, he's an editor. Yeah, okay, fine,
exactly. Fine. He's been working for 56 years in this around. This area.
Right.
Yeah,
sick.
Yeah, man, he's man's on.
Oh, yeah. Sick.
So he starts to talk about the current state of where we are. So he's talking about currently in the cabinet right now we have Abe Shinzo, we have the LDP having a 2/3 majority. I can't remember which house it was, but importantly in the cabinet we have all the members of the cabinet are members of Nippon Kaigi, which is a
explain that. That'll be very interesting.
Nippon Kaigi is a nationalist political organization. Basically, I should have said this. That one of the things that they like doing, like all nationalists, like historical revisionism. Let's give them new textbooks in schools. It's the same sort of stuff that they were pulling in 1980s, 70s. It's their modus operandi.
Yeah.
He also mentioned Abe's good relationship with Donald Trump, which we're going to talk about later.
Okay.
In a previous book in 2007, he coined the term client state, right? Where the idea of having a client kingdom was already pre-established. Where a certain kingdom, petitions for another more strong kingdom to offer a service to them, usually a military protectionary service.
Yeah.
In return, they would offer them some sort of tribute financially or give them political and economic power.
Yeah. So in Japan's case, with their client stateness.
Yeah, what McCormack is saying is that in return for allowing the US, so what they're getting from the relationship is that they're getting the security from the US.
Yeah.
And also the economic relations with the US, because there was an Asian sort of I think there was an Asian sort of equivalent to the Marshall Plan.
Oh, okay.
I think there was, but I know at least they must have invested in the Japanese economy
and this rebuilding after the war. Yeah. But what does America gets?
Yeah.
Obviously,
what does America get?
Obviously, America gets to be able to say have some sort of control over the area into
exactly. So they are able to project power. So with South Korea, which is South Korean history is even more extreme compared to Japan's. Something I should actually get into, because it's but it doesn't have the same sort of intrigue as Japan, because in Japan you have an outwardly liberal democracy, but then a single party controlling it for 50 years, and then no party coming close, and then the opposition party is just like a facade, like they're completely ineffectual and have no ideology. In South Korea, the conditions are more extreme, but then there's less intrigue because there was outright military dictatorships. So it's like, it's more boring. Anyway,
I mean, South Korea did recently have that massive scandal where but let's not get into that. It's like a fucking it's. Let's not get too off track, but
anyway,
it's some crazy shit.
Yeah, it's crazy shit. Like with cults and stuff.
Yeah, the cult stuff. That's fucked up.
Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So.
Where were we at?
Yeah.
What does America get?
What was America getting?
Because I assume they don't get the executive power over Japan. At least not. Not outwardly.
Really. But like America's always influenced foreign power. So especially suppressing left-wing movements in Japan, they were able to move Japan's hand. I think the Japanese state would have done that regardless, because of how many pre-war people returned to bureaucratic and executive positions after, like, they were rehabilitated after the Red Scare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when we mean the Red Scare. I mean,
so what was happening immediately post-war was sort of liberalization, and basically political prisoners were being released, especially on the left in Japan, because the occupying forces had an idea that they would be very important in stopping any fascists retaking power. But then after the Red Scare in the US, and then I think Eisenhower pushing for more containment of communist countries, they reversed that policy, where they basically rehabilitated the fascist elements in Japan to suppress
the communists.
Yeah. So I'm going off that from Enigma of Japanese Power.
Okay. All right. So
in addition, what I forget. I was going to make another point of what US gets, but that's mostly
what America.
Sorry, I was going to. It's a soundbite. So Nakasone in the 80s said.
Who's Nakasone?
Nakasone was a prime minister, quite nationalist as well. But he said, obviously, again, contradiction. He said Japan's role is to be America's gigantic aircraft carrier. So in the Pacific. So client state was coined mostly by
McCormack.
McCormack. And then there's also this idea in the LDP. So in the LDP, to explain the different ideas regarding the US and Japanese US-Japanese relationship, you can define two factions, right? The servilists, aka coming from servile, people who are servile, and the autonomists.
Right? Yeah. So these are two different groups. These are two different like theorized groups, essentially. Like
not theorized, but
well, like two descriptors that we can use for people in the LDP.
Yeah.
And their approaches to the US-Japan relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
So servilist. Okay. Cool. We'll just continue. Yeah.
So a scholar called Magasaki, I should have taken down his name, developed this servile/autonomous theory. And then McCormack said, I quote, "Note the notion that Japan is a client state is no longer a rare or extreme position." Right? Yeah. So
presumably previously mentioning these sorts of ideas that Japan might have been servile or autonomous, or that members of the LDP could be split up into those different factions.
No. In
the client state.
McCormack. Can't believe I forgot his name. What McCormack was mostly saying was meaning in 2007, describing Japan as a client state was a bit more because you're implying you're basically saying that Japan's sovereignty, you're basically putting that into question. You're saying that Japan is not really sovereign.
Yeah.
So that's a big statement, but I guess over the years the
conversation has shifted, or at least
people like the problem with you might like people probably took the term client state the wrong way. They probably saw it much more literally than a more of a slight metaphor that McCormack was probably using as.
Yeah, and since that people have understood that and it's more readily accepted.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, at the very least, if it's not accepted, people don't immediately, as you said, dismiss you out of the conversation for mentioning it.
Yeah, they have to actually argue against it. So, yeah, the Japanese state is unique in how it was designed with regards to a foreign interest.
Yeah,
in the US. So you can't say that for most other modern countries. So, with most other modern countries, there's at least
when they define their constitutions,
it's at least shown to be something of their own design.
Yeah.
But whereas in Japan, there wasn't even the facade of that. Everyone in Japan is under no illusion that
Japan's constitution was basically drafted by
the
General.
US.
General MacArthur.
Was forced upon Japan.
Right. So it was General MacArthur that drafted it, or is it just?
I wouldn't say German, but the occupying forces.
Okay.
What McCormack then says is that the Emperor of Japan, so Emperor Showa / Hirohito. So Hirohito is his live name after he died. Showa.
So yeah, Showa is 40s to 80s, right?
Yeah.
Roughly how one.
In Japan, he's referred to as Showa because he's dead.
Yeah, I know, right? But I'm just saying, when you're mentioning Showa, right? Showa. All right.
Yeah.
When you're mentioning him, just give people a general understanding of the time period of when he ruled.
Because he was Emperor Hirohito, so he was wartime, a little bit pre-wartime. So pre-wartime, wartime, and then post-wartime as well.
So did he watch over the Japanese economic miracle?
Yeah.
Okay, and when did he die?
I think early 90s or something.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so yeah. So essentially,
you just look up Heisei period to see when that. It's not that important.
No, but I'm just saying, so we have an idea of when you're talking about.
But the reason why I just brought him up is because McCormack said that the emperor himself was basically helped the US create their state and implement their interests.
Yeah.
He went into a lot of detail, but I wasn't able to note it down. But it's actually, I think it's a fair, from what I've heard from a few opposing views, that him claiming that was a bit
out there.
Yeah, controversial, because the emperor was supposed to be ceremonial, and obviously after this supposed direct interference, he's been more of a constitutional monarch. So I'll have to look into that. It's a good thing I've got the book now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But McCormack's assertion is that Emperor Hirohito
had some hand to play in the design of the
essentially helped America draft and design post-war Japan. Yeah.
So the important thing is that after the constitution was implemented and the terms of the U.S.-Japan relations were defined by the U.S., the Japanese political elite were pretty happy with it, right? We're talking about the precursors to the LDP in its modern form, but we can basically keep calling them the LDP. They were all perfectly happy with this relationship for a multitude of reasons, but mostly because they were protecting the state in a way. So
yeah, and that sort of attitude to that relationship is what commentators would now call servile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we need to understand that post-war, all of the LDP political elite is servile. Right?
Yeah,
but as the economic miracle occurred, and then as it reached its fever pitch in the 80s, where as it reached its fever pitch in the 80s, Japanese miracle caused the ideological shift from servility to autonomy. So this is when he started to have figures like Nakasone, who were quite nationalist and who were trying to
exert Japanese influence on the world, right?
Not just that, but sort of stand up to the USA and just show that Japan was going their own way. Japan in this point in time, it's interesting to note that Japanese power was not being exerted by the state itself, but by Japanese corporations. So, in a fun way, we can look at. You can notice this through Back to the Future too, where Marty McFly in the future is working for this gigantic Japanese conglomerate who's taken over, like.
Literally every futurist piece of media in the 80s by Americans. They were all fucking pissing themselves and thinking that Japan was going to rule the future.
Exactly, but that's exactly what was happening, because what, as described in Enigma, what Japan was doing at that point was they were creating huge amounts of growth by investing in foreign markets, and then immediately reinvesting that money in buying more of foreign market share. So Japanese companies were buying more and more of foreign markets and foreign companies.
Okay.
So they were trying to assert themselves economically this way. And obviously the bubble bursts, and then you have this retraction of the Japanese state and Japanese political power.
Yeah.
And to the relief of the Americans and the West. A whole bunch of reasons. Because basically Japan, they accuse of Japan being uncompetitive, which is actually a fair assessment. They weren't being competitive in the same way Western countries were being competitive. There was much more cooperation between the corporate side and the state than there was in Western states. So they thought, oh, it's not fair. Whatever. So then we mentioned that Shinzo Abe opposes liberal democracy, and he wants Shinto Kokutai philosophy to dominate.
Okay.
And Kokutai is this idea of a national polity, which basically it's sort of a idea of a compilation of the Japanese people, the Yamato people as a whole, and the Japanese state. So you put them together, and then you sort of present them as one, right?
Yeah.
And then you present them as one to the Japanese people, who then absorb this ideology. So,
yeah.
This is, and the Kokutai philosophy was basically sort of, it's got its roots. It is basically the wartime philosophy.
Yeah.
So in '97.
So Abe's trying to revive it, essentially.
Yeah, so that's what he's going for. So in '97, Nippon Kai was formed.
So I don't think we've really gone into what Nippon Kaigi is. So it's like it's basically kind of like a political, right-wing political think tank kind of.
I wouldn't say
not think tank. It's not a think tank. It's kind of like an organization of like-minded political individuals.
Yeah. So like they say. I think they might also prepare textbooks. So his history textbooks, obviously.
All right, so they literally engage in historical revisionism, I assume.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
So McCormack describes Shinzo Abe's first attempt as clientelist Mark I, where he wants to have his nationalism cake and eat it, and have the cake and eat it is my description. So he wants to have this neo-nationalist ideology and neo-nationalist thing, but he wants to, at the same time, keep the US influence in Japan in the form of defense.
So it's contradictory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some years later, so he was prime minister from 2006 to 2007, first time around, Shinzo Abe. In 2009, you got the DPJ winning for the first time
in 50 years.
Yeah, there have been times where the assigned opposition party was in a position of strength, but obviously they didn't really win an election, I think.
So it's like they were so it was like a minority government sometimes, is what you're saying.
I'm not fully aware. I'll have to take a look at that later. Anyway. So Yukio Hatoyama
was the DPJ leader.
Yeah, and Prime Minister of Japan from 2009. So he was Prime Minister of Japan from like 10 months.
10 months. Okay.
The reason why was that he wanted to move away from the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this, they mentioned the Hosaka/Higuchi report. I think that was basically a proposal for the change in the US-Japan relations.
Oh, okay. What was the name of it again?
Hosaka Higuchi report.
Okay.
So the US opposed this outright, and this is 2009 during the Obama administration. So we're talking about the Obama administration and the Clinton Secretary of State. State Department, sorry. State Department? State Department deals with foreign relations, I think. Whatever. The US also demands Japan to increase their military responsibilities. So Japan gets involved in Iraq, and the Maritime Defense Force also gets positioned in the Indian Ocean. So I'm not sure about the timeline for that, but the way McCormack positioned it it seemed like it was a response. Anyway,
so America was essentially unhappy with Japanese posturing at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So it wasn't posturing, because Hatoyama again, like, I think he was being reasonable. He was trying. I think he wanted to renegotiate, or I'll get to it a bit later.
Right. And I think I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but one thing you pointed out to me when we were discussing this briefly earlier is that the president at this time can't be forgotten that it was Obama. So
yeah. So
sometimes a lot of left-wing people say, Obama wasn't an angel, and
exactly. So
I mean, that much is obvious, but like this is like a clear example of his slightly more imperialist tendencies, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I won't say like it's an imperialist tendency, but because like it's just sort of him carrying on the status quo. It's like you can't really you can't really say Obama was
a massive change.
A massive change.
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
Like, if he was like that, he wouldn't have gotten elected in the first place. He had to be,
safe.
Exactly. Like, there was much more left wing, black politicians in the US for much longer.
Yeah.
They never made any real leeway because you can dismiss them out of hand.
I think Jesse Jackson ran for presidency in 2000 or 96.
Yeah, but he wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the important thing is, in 2005, the DP manifesto had some explicitly stated that they were against their current form of U.S.-Japan relations, and the Democrat Party wanted a equal relationship with the U.S. So they wanted to renegotiate their relationship, but on equal footing, because they feel that the U.S. was overbearing on Japan,
especially considering the situation at the time the relationship was first negotiated.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was basically post-war Japan.
But then also, from that point onward, it wasn't really negotiated in different terms. It wasn't. You can see that the US never really saw Japan
as an equal. I see. They were kind of. I mean, I'm not saying this is how it went, but you would assume they were dictating terms more like.
That's at least how the DPJ saw it.
Yes.
Right. So, Hatoyama was threatened and warned by the US, right? So quite strongly. Okay. So the words coming out from Washington were very clear in response to Hatoyama's suggestions or desires.
Yeah.
When this was picked up immediately by the media, which then the thing about the Japanese media is that it has an ability to take an issue and just make it explode. The reasons for that can be actually quite insidious, as explained in Enigma, because sometimes, especially with LDP politicians in the 80s, the press could have a lot of dirt on them, but they won't publish it at all ever to keep the politicians on their side, so they can keep having a good relationship with the politicians, so they can keep not be ostracized and report on them frequently.
I see.
And know where they're going, and then the politicians will give them some insider information as well regarding the economy or construction or whatever, right? But once that politician gets into a scandal and this journalist can feel the political winds saying, okay, this guy's going down. What happens? Karel van Wolferen describes this phenomenon in Enigma. The papers are suddenly filled with reams and reams of news stories about all the dirt on this guy, right? And just it seems to appear out of nowhere. But they were these files were already kept on them all the time.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
So you're saying that
the important thing is that the scandal has to reach a level where it's not acceptable anymore, right?
I see.
If the scandal cannot be controlled, then the press pushes the button and finishes the job. If the scandal can be controlled and cooled down, then the press knows to sort of back off.
Yeah, because right? I see.
So this is sort of what's happening with Hatoyama. He's being sort of messed up by the press, and then in May 2010, the Hatoyama government collapses, and then the next government, remember, same party, because the DPJ
is elected
the DPJ is in power as a party, is a majority party until 2012.
Yes.
So from 2010 to 2012, the next government wants to quote heal the wounds end quote caused by Hatoyama between the US and Japan.
Holy
so
shit.
that's how badly the US eviscerated I think, I'm not sure how liberal Hatoyama was, but I think this might have been a liberal attempt at renegotiating this the relationship. So not based off some sort of national essence, like sort of nationalist wish to have a real army, something like that. Anyway, now McCormack quickly asked a question: is Abe conscious of the contradiction between his nationalist tendencies and wanting to keep the U.S. power in Japan? He actually keeps this question open. So McCormack doesn't say if he knows Abe is conscious of it or not, but then he just talks about how he acts.
I see.
So his ideology was initially creating worry in the US. So he's talking about how he wants to take Japan back from the United States. But in 2012, when he gets back into power, Shinzo Abe, he in fact deepens his clientelist stance, and this is what McCormack is taught, says is clientelism Mark II or 2.0. So the 1. Mark 1 and Mark 2 terms is not actually in the book, but he says he came up with it after the book was published. So
okay.
Yeah. So in 2013 he visited the Yasukuni Shrine, but the Clinton, he said the Clinton administration, McCormack said the Clinton administration. So he was referring quite specifically to the State Department. So
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton. So they admonished him that he'd never made a visit to Yasukuni Shrine since.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And in 2015, he finally made a state visit to Washington to show which demonstrated how normalized the relationship had gone. Okay. So his approach. So in 2018, his approach is far different from 12 years ago, right? Yeah. So in Japan, we saw in South Korea there's been an agreement on comfort women. There's been agreement to pay them some compensation, right? And national interests have been deprioritized, and U.S. interests have been prioritized for Shinzo Abe. Now he goes on to talking about Okinawa, and then he mentioned.
I'm sorry. I just want to ask, which national interests and which U.S. interests in particular are you sure of?
I can't. If he specified, he didn't really. I didn't really note it down. So.
I see.
Yeah, I'm just reading off my notes right now. So, Okinawa keeps resisting Japan and the U.S. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a frequent fixture, to be honest.
So the thing is that Japan can crush Okinawan resistance. So Okinawa is trying to resist the building of a secondary military base.
Secondary American military base.
Yeah.
In Okinawa, which is already on the way, as you told me earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if they want, they could crush and stop all opposition. But McCormack says that they don't want to risk outright rebellion or secession by the Okinawans. So he's saying that the reason why Tokyo hasn't taken a much more direct action against Okinawa is because they might actually fear a much stronger resistance.
So in what terms? So like
literally
the way you phrase it sounds like Okinawans might actually take up arms.
So, well, in the 70s, there was a building of Narita Airport, right?
Okay, was that in Okinawa?
Not.
Oh, it's
Narita.
Tokyo. Yeah. Okay. I don't know.
So
shit,
the residents of
fucking stupid.
Narita, but basically there was a very long, very sustained left-wing opposition, frequent clashes with riot police, right? Which, causes a political situation. The LDP wants to keep these people under control. Now, this is stuff I'm talking from reading Enigma. If you can't have a political component under control, you have to find some way to crush it, right? Which is already a disadvantageous position because these people already have popular support. So
in Okinawa.
no,
Or
like
on Narita.
if you've so if you've allowed them to get to a position where you have to crush them, you've already, in a sense, lost. You haven't done well enough. Obviously, you don't have protests in Narita happening anymore because it's gone and done.
Yeah.
But what McCormack says that Japan's tactic for Okinawa is sowing despair by just being unyielding and just continually not responding to any Okinawan resistance. So it's basically incredibly insidious, basically by making people feel powerless, by allowing them to protest, allowing them to shout and scream and do whatever they want, but then not heeding a single word of it. So just by allowing, to a certain degree, protests, obviously riot police is deployed when necessary, but just ignore them, make them feel powerless that way. So he refers to specific action by some of the residents of Okinawa. So there's daily confrontations between 60 to 80 year old Okinawans with police, and then what they do is that there's a road to the construction site. They just go there and sit in front of the road. These old Okinawans, to prevent the construction materials from being taken in. Right? Riot police comes in. They literally lift them up and put them onto the side of the road, and then McCormack says they dust themselves off and then sit back down again.
In the middle of the road.
Yeah, and this happens daily.
I see.
So he's mentioning this as a form of continuing resistance to Japanese and US interests. And then
and that's where the worry comes from for Japan that Okinawa might take more drastic action.
Yeah. So I didn't write this down, no, but I remember it clearly. So McCormack's, this is coming to the end of McCormack's part of the talk, where he says, like, I understand that this isn't quite rosy, and then my sort of outlook isn't as rosy as other people's, but I do have some optimism, and he says that Japanese people are quite attuned to environmental and constitutional problems, and they're quite committed, like, especially he was mentioning environmental problems. So the thing that always gets me is that when I hear people talk about how people are committed to environmental problems, especially in terms of Japan, and presenting that as liberal ideology, to me, environmental concerns always sounds a bit like a platitude rather than something strictly, properly ideological. Like someone, looking after the environment is something that you don't have to be left wing or liberal to champion.
Yeah.
You can, and that's a problem with pinning your liberal ideology on that, because then you can be just co-opted so easily by the right wing. Right.
I mean, the difference is how you go about implementing it.
Yeah.
With people on the right wing, or not really right wing, but with certain interests, certain political outlooks, environmentalism or being environmentally friendly isn't supported simply because of the fact that it's regulation, government regulation, that is the main driving force for it. Yeah,
exactly. But like cap and trade, cap and trade is like a perfect neoliberal solution to it.
Yeah.
To like global warming and the use of petroleum.
Yeah.
Where you turn
not just petroleum, like coal-fired power plants as well.
Exactly. Where you turn fossil fuels, for example.
Yeah.
Where you turn like emissions and pollution into a commodity you can trade. It's just like it's really pathetic.
Yeah, but it's an example of essentially environmentalism not being leftist, not being
being appropriated,
not being government, government I mean, cap and trade is government regulation to a certain degree, but
Yeah.
it's essentially laissez-faire because it's like do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah,
just
long,
follow the rules.
As long as you can buy enough like carbon credits, you can pollute as much as you want.
I'm gonna get my 4 points.
The really sad thing is like, oh, and then we'll use the money from those carbon credits for environmental things. It's like the damage is already done. It's so. Anyway.
All right. Okay. So
yeah.
One thing you mentioned, so you were talking about his outlook, and you're saying that.
He says that like that those views of Japanese people gives him hope and stuff like that.
Okay, but here's the thing: I don't understand what McCormack's general outlook was in this. Right? He was talking about how.
Well, what he was doing is that he was basically describing the Japanese, how the Japanese state operates, and then how Abe wanted to like I didn't really get into it because I didn't write enough notes, but he was asserting his nationalism much more strongly and in a in your face way earlier, but now in his new sort of outward look. So especially with his relationship with Donald Trump, what McCormack was saying was that he was, as soon as Donald Trump became president, he was the first. Abe was the first person to give him a state visit, right? So what McCormack interpreted this as was like wanting to create a new servile, sort of system.
Okay.
Like sort of establish that relationship on that basis. And
I mean, I don't really see how this in particular is a grim outlook for Japan. It's just how the political establishment is acting a certain way. It doesn't really say anything specific to us that affects Japanese people day to day. I guess except for Okinawans. And
yeah, but then the problem is the sovereignty of the state is with the like you would expect that a liberal democracy represents the interests of
its people.
But
Okay,
the
fair
problem
enough.
with Japan is that if it's a client state, it has to
give up some sort of
political power, which is the power to America. So
yeah,
essentially, Japanese people are disenfranchised.
Okay,
in this case, which is the problem.
So that was McCormack's part of the talk.
Yeah, and then we've got Professor Arthur Stockwin. So he starts to talk, and he basically starts the first few minutes recounting how they met. So, I can't remember. I should have wrote down.
Professor Stockwin and McCormack, the story of how they met.
Yeah, McCormack. So they were. I can't remember. I think it was the 60s. Yeah. So they went to a So McCormack and Stockwin met at a youth hostel in Japan, in Tonegawa, right? So he recounts this whole story about how the youth hostel owner planted a few Australian eucalyptus trees. So he then contacted the Australian embassy in Japan to send him.
Who did? The hostel owner.
The hostel owner. He contacted them to send all of the Australian students currently in Tokyo at the time to him, so he could
taste of home.
Inaugurate those new trees he planted. And the funny thing was the Australian embassy was only able to find 3 people to direct them to this youth hostel to go to, and he was and then Professor Stockwin said he was probably expecting 20 or 30 people to show up. It was only 3 people, so it was Stockwin.
So Stockwin and McCormack are both Australian.
Yeah, and then the other Australian was the son of the ambassador to Japan at the time. So
I see.
the Australian ambassador, and he was actually in Japan on vacation because he was studying in Cambridge.
I see.
I forgot to note down his name, the ambassador's son, but whatever.
Okay, cool.
And he talks about how they were on a boat ride on the river, and then so that's the first time they met.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and the
so mid-60s.
Yeah, the youth hostel owner thought that the son of the ambassador would know Japanese. That was not the case. So he treated the ambassador's one son was of a higher rank, so he talked to him more. But McCormack and Stockwin had to translate,
interpret,
which is hard because Stockwin and McCormack were doing their dissertations in Japan, so that's why they were in Japan as students.
I see.
And they were only, their Japanese level wasn't quite advanced yet.
Oh, I see.
And then they went on a boat ride. They went to a Japanese person's home who wanted to host them. They had big beer mugs, which they thought was full of beer, but it turned out that as soon as they drank it was full of whiskey.
Oh,
and then
shit.
They got, and then he sort of cut his story around there, saying we got back home, but I don't know how we did. So it's a very cute story. Anyway, Stockwin says that McCormack has a great knowledge of sources, right? And what he wanted to do in his part of the talk is basically show how he disagrees with Stockwin. So how Stockwin disagrees, how he disagrees with McCormack.
Yeah.
So most of the thing that was hard to note down was that most of his talk was saying how he agrees with a lot of the points, but one thing that he disagrees with first was with Hatoyama, the leader,
DPJ Prime Minister
from 2009 to 10. He said that his downfall wasn't entirely engineered and put forth through the US.
Okay.
Because the problem with Hatoyama, he says, is that when he put forward the plan, he didn't really think it completely through. So, for one thing, Hatoyama was, wanted the base in Okinawa to be removed, but he never offered where it can be moved. Right. So, one of the options that he could have given was move it somewhere else in Japan, which is completely possible. Or what he could have offered was move towards Guam. Although Stockwin did admit it might have been proposed, but it might have been also rejected by the US, right? But he also didn't completely.
So wait, when we say he might have been proposed, are you saying that it might have been proposed and rejected and we never heard about it, or are you saying if they had proposed it, US would have rejected it, so that's probably why they didn't do it in the first place?
I think Stockwin was basically saying he was. I'm not exactly sure what he was saying there. Sorry. So
okay, fine.
So Stockwin also mentions that the freedom of speech was being so not related to. So I think he was agreeing with McCormack here, but I noted it down specifically here. Freedom of speech is under attack under the Abe government.
Current Abe government.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah. So he gone into detail about this in a book that he published in 2017. So Professor Stockwin, and I asked him later what this was, and there was a secrets law that was passed in either 2013 or 15, which basically means that if a journalist publishes certain sensitive information, they can go to jail.
Okay, but basically certain sensitive information being what exactly?
Well, that's the thing. Like, obviously,
state secrets.
State secrets, but the problem with this is that it has a chilling effect on all sort of investigations into state dealings. Like, even if it's a state secret, right?
Yeah.
If there's if it's in the public interest to know, if there's a there's a huge interest for the public to know, then you want to publish that anyway,
Yeah.
right? But then either way, you can be prosecuted for that.
I see.
And then the name of the book is called Rethinking Japan. Stockwin also states that Okinawa is probably seen as disposable by Tokyo. They're distant from Tokyo geographically, and they're also different in terms of culture. Okinawa has a Japonic language as well. So he also disagrees with McCormack's view on the emperor. So this is why I was saying that McCormack's explanation that the emperor had some
influence on how the US were able to implement.
Yeah, he disagrees with that, but again, I need to take a look into it. The role of Showa was exaggerated by McCormack in Stockwin's view. So let me just and he also disagrees with the client state status. So in 1980s, Japan could have easily gained a much more independent stance in the world, right? So he doesn't think that Japan is primarily a client state. It's sort of more of a it's basically what their situation forces upon them. So Japan wouldn't have been a client state if they didn't come out from a costly war, if they weren't next to a large communist power, and for a whole bunch of reasons. So they're not a client state because they were engineered as such and then forced as such, but more because it's a beneficial for them. And then in the 1980s, if they managed to have a
incredibly powerful economic,
and then if they managed to sustain that, they probably wouldn't have, like, this description wouldn't have been made in the first place.
So because you're saying that in what was his name?
McCormack.
No, the other guy. Stockwin. You're saying in Stockwin's view, the client state, essentially the entire client state situation of Japan didn't come about because it was dictated, forced upon the Japanese by America, but because Japan kind of saw.
Obviously,
initially it was, but Japan continued with it,
the relationship,
because it was beneficial to them.
Exactly.
So you're saying that in Stockwin's view, Japan would have taken a stronger stance in the past if it was not beneficial to them.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess Stockwin uses the fact that in the 80s there was more of a shift towards autonomy within the LDP, as evidence for that. I'm kind of skeptical.
Not as he didn't really use the political movements as evidence, but basically the fact that Japan could afford economically.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, right? Like the fact that they allowed the fact that they continued, the fact that they did not resist the fact that they did not resist the arrangement or did not negotiate against it until the 80s. He probably used it as some sort of evidence in favor of his argument that it wasn't a one-sided relationship all the way through.
Exactly. Like if Japan had the resources, they could negotiate themselves out of it. Although I have to again point out, even Nakasone, who was a nationalist prime minister in the 80s, he wasn't like backing out of the relationship fully.
Yeah.
He probably could have put himself in a position where he could have done that, but he didn't. So again, that's the other hand. Anyway, so he also Stockwin also mentions this. So Abe's immediate visit to Donald Trump.
I just mentioned something. I'm sorry. When you mentioned Nakasone, then even though he was nationalist and could possibly put himself in a situation where he could move Japan out of the client's quote unquote client state arrangement.
Yeah.
It can be used as an argument either way, right? The fact that he didn't can be used as an argument either way. Like either you can say it's because America was twisting the arm of Japan so tight that despite his nationalist tendencies and despite the fact that Japan was in a pretty good position at the time, they couldn't do it because America was too strong, right? Or you could say that Nakasone, even though he was nationalist and even though Japan was in such a good economic position, the benefits to Japan were such that he felt no incredibly strong desire to move out. Yeah. So I feel like that doesn't really, that can go either way in terms of an evidence for an argument. So it's not really useful to consider it. But yeah, continue.
Yeah. So Abe's immediate visit to Donald Trump, he interpreted differently from McCormack. He says that it could be seen as a shrewd move by Abe to put Japan first in Donald Trump's mind. So rather than as a sort of a subservient move, Abe could. I actually sort of prefer this interpretation because it's quite obvious that Abe doesn't respect Trump at all.
But how is that obvious?
Is that facial expressions? Like it's just straight up, like doing that visit to keep Japan in his mind. So if he can make Trump a friend, he can basically be like, he can keep their interests. He can make He can make Donald Trump agree with Abe's request and agree with him.
Okay.
Also,
well, are you going to talk more about Abe and Trump?
No.
Okay. I think there's a factor within the Abe and Trump relationship that hasn't. I'm pretty sure both McCormack and I forgot his name again. Stockwin. I keep on calling him like Swinton or something. Stockwin. I'm pretty sure there's a factor that both McCormack and Stockwin have considered, but they haven't mentioned here for Abe's warm relationship with Trump, just purely out of a self-preservation, just purely out of the self-preservation kind of aspect of it, because I think a lot of people have been talking for a long time about how Trump is very quick to react, right, and that and the potential dangers of that regarding a potential nuclear war with North Korea. So, but establishing some sort of warm relationship with Trump in order to be trusted to be trusted enough to say when the time comes, don't push that button, is I think one of the reasons why Abe went there in the first place, even if that wasn't really publicly acknowledged or the main reason. I think maybe Abe wanted to do that to just try and make sure that Trump was kind of aware of like where his friends were and where the potential fallout literally might go in the case of a nuclear war with North Korea.
Yeah.
Which, as it turns out, wasn't too much of a big deal considering recent developments in North Korea.
They mentioned that as well. Like McCormack. Now I remember McCormack says that's another reason to give him hope. So, if the Korea political situation in Korea could be defused, then there's nothing that stops the political situation in Okinawa to be similarly defused. So, a political situation in Okinawa has been going on for a lot more than 50 years, basically sort of the same time frame as Korea. So why not have the same thing happen in Korea? So that was another reason. Like his reasons for optimism were very shaky, which is why I asked a question about it. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry about all the interruptions.
So he also, you raised this point already. So Stockwin said, also would independent Japanese military under a nationalist prime minister be a good idea? Maybe the US status quo is better for Japan. and Japan needs allies, right, in the Pacific. So obviously, do you want to leave Japan with a nationalist army? Probably not, because that's if you.
So what was it? Do you want to leave? Are you talking to me as if I was the Prime Minister of Japan at the time?
No, as if you you were playing a game of Risk or something. Like, would you if you wanted if you were looking out for the best interests of Japan, would you say bye bye U.S. military, hello repealed bye bye U.S. military, bye bye Ninth Article of Constitution, hello Japanese army,
Yeah.
and then what would a Japanese army and a nationalist prime minister be a good mix? Probably not, right? As opposed to a U.S. military presence, but keeping the U.S. military presence there, not as a advanced guard or like an invasion force, but more of a attack us and then you get this, have to deal with us.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's a way of essentially establishing a alliance between various Pacific countries without actually having to do it yourself, right? Because America's got so many bases around the West Pacific. I don't know.
And then he said that would an Asia facing Japan be able to face China and get a fair deal without U.S. backing? So we're talking about Japan not getting a fair deal with the U.S. Would a completely independent Japan get a fair deal with China? Probably not.
No.
Again, and then
I mean,
Japan facing Chinese imperialist ambitions. That's another reason why they might want imperial U.S. backing. And let's see. And he talks about the economic policies of Koizumi, talking about neoliberalism. I can't remember why he brought that up. So that's he probably brought up because Koizumi wanted to. I don't know if he succeeded in privatizing the post office, which is an even bigger deal in Japan than it was in the UK.
Wow.
Do you know why?
No.
You know, in Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
What do you do in the post office?
You pay off your mortgage.
Yeah, but it's also your bank.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a bank account in Japan, like if you're a Japanese person with a bank account, it is almost without fail a postal savings account.
Oh shit. So
the vast majority of Japanese personal savings is in the post office.
And that was national.
That was national. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Exactly. And then people in Western countries oh, you go it's so nice in Japan because you go to send your mail and bank there. Why wouldn't they have this? And then and then if you privatize that whole thing, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
I don't know if Koizumi did, but he was talking about how Koizumi implemented neoliberal policies. But then I don't know enough about Abe's economic policies to be fair comparison, because he was comparing Koizumi in that way.
Fair enough.
Stockwell sees change. Yeah, and importantly, Stockwell sees change in Japanese politics, whereas McCormack sees stasis. Excuse me. I wrote it down wrong, in fact. So, in 1994, the changes in the electoral system of the lower house, right, resulted in the LDP rival factions creating pluralism. So
when talking about LDP rival factions, are you talking about
the different Habatsu?
Okay, I was gonna say, oh, you're talking about Servile and
no. So you have a whole bunch of. The best way to think about them are gangs, right? Headed by sort of a gang leader, right? But it's a key feature of Japanese democracy because you don't really have parties, but you do have different factions of the LDP. So you obviously have opposition parties, but they're not big deal. In fact, you have different, because of the Democratic Party's Big Tent philosophy, it is by design also houses a bunch of factions. Some of which are left the LDP for some reason or other. So actual LDP factions in the opposition party.
Hold on, wait. So are you saying the DPJ is further right than the LDP?
No, I'm not saying it's further right, but like it can contain elements of the LDP. That's how Big Tent they are.
I see.
Yeah, like if some LDP Habatsu is trying to make some sort of dramatic political move, they're saying we're leaving the LDP for the Democrat Party, and then the newspapers write some stories about that. Like it's theatre. It's really theatre. Anyway, but to change in the electoral system, they changed from a multiple member, so each constituency had multiple members. They changed that to sort of more of a single member constituency, which is more of what we have in the UK. For some reason, that resulted in more pluralism.
What's pluralism?
Basically, more diverse politics in the LDP.
Okay,
but I'm not sure why, because from
his
descriptions, it sounds like more different factions were represented.
Okay, so if you got multiple if you've got multiple
seats per constituency.
Yeah, we've got multiple seats per constituency, and you want to change it so you have one seat per constituency. You're going to break up the constituencies, right? So, what I can imagine happens is that for a larger constituency, you've got a wider variety of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want your free candidates for those seats.
Yeah.
To be
there's multiple LDP candidates.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying the most popular candidates are going to be the ones that represent the widest variety of people. So they're going to be the most blandest, if you want to think of it that way. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you split up the constituencies to make them smaller, you can have candidates that focus more on specific issues that affect the local area and might be more left or right leaning depending on the constituency itself.
Yeah.
So that might create more plurality.
What he was saying is that in the multiple member constituencies, the LDPs had to compete with opposition parties, and then he made a note of this, but they also had to compete amongst themselves, right? And then what you're saying is right. So if they had to compete amongst themselves, they had to. Yeah, essentially. The problem is that, like I said, Habatsu politics is more like gang politics. So they have like differences in ideology, right? Obviously, they like some of them are constitutionalists, which means that they are against repealing the knife, which is like, wow, like LDP politicians like against militarization. How crazy. But yeah, it's something that can happen. But I guess if you have a single member constituency, then a single Habatsu member can. Again, I still didn't fully understand. But importantly, the most important thing that Stockwell said, and one of the last things he was saying, is that the executive branch and the cabinet, so the cabinet is an executive branch, is much stronger than it was before the 1990s, right? Which was very important for me because the book I was reading is basically
describing that.
Describing that system, right? So the Hashimoto government, 1997, implemented, put forward these changes, and they were in effect by 2001. So now, the important thing is the prime minister now actually has more power, right? The whole, like the enigma of Japanese power, the actual name of the book that I was reading, is sort of inspired by the fact that the prime minister says something, but then the state of Japan does something else. So the prime minister of Japan ratifies an agreement, and then the state of Japan passes laws that literally contravene that agreement. So what's going on? Isn't the prime minister supposed to put forward laws, and then he's supposed to have a majority, which then rubber stamps those laws to go with that agreement? No, not really, because of the interplay of habatsu. So in a cabinet, you usually don't fill it up with members of your own habatsu, because then you won't have the political power to create alliances between different groups.
Basically, if all your habatsu are in your cabinet, they're too busy to essentially network within your parliament, I guess.
Because here's the thing, because usually prime ministerships last for 2 years and don't get to do shit, right? But for some reason, people still go for them anyway, right? That's something weird about Japanese politics. But just
Japan in general.
Just take that as a given, right? People still want the prime ministership. Now, what you can do as a habatsu, right? If you ally yourselves together, which will allow yourself to have a large amount of political power, right? And then you can put yourself as the leader of the LDP. You can create an arrangement where the leader of one habatsu, once they leave, will have as their deputy the leader of the other habatsu, right? So once that prime minister leaves,
the next one comes up.
The next one comes in, the leader of the next habatsu comes in.
And then a similar agreement, so it's just like a...
Not a loop, but because the politics always shift, but that's how habatsu politics and the LDP work.
I see.
Yeah. So, anyway, and also this last thing I wrote down, Koizumi's son might actually be a big player in the future of the LDP. So he was, the last part of his talk, Stockwind was talking about a whole bunch of potential new kings of the LDP party after Shinzo, because his time might be up soon. It's taking a while. It's taking a whole bloody fucking long while.
It's longer than normal
for him to come back. Well, obviously as a he's.
How long has Abe been in power for?
He's close to being.
The longest serving.
Yeah, he is either this long serving, or he's close to being long serving. But that still means like 6 years. Like, anyway. So when I asked McCormack about if he's
these are answers to your questions after the talk.
Yeah. So after my talk, I just had one specific question, right? From McCormack, where it was like, hey, I'm going to talk about what happened after the Q&A session as well. I asked, so
this is the question you asked in the Q&A session.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Go on. So in the Q&A session, I asked McCormack. So what I see is that you have these Moritomo Gakuen and Kage Gakuen scandals, where these are scandals where Shinzo Abe and or his wife were involved in funding private schools, I think, with public money.
Okay.
So the scandal isn't actually that complicated, it's just I can't remember it. But it's just a gigantic shitstorm.
Yeah, but what's the main point of the scandal? What's the main point you're trying to make by bringing up these
because
scandals?
This is a big scandal and people aren't happy about it, Japanese public. Like, Abe's popularity is declining. But if you look at opinion polls regarding political parties, the largest party that comes up with 36% share of the vote, I left like popularity, who would you give your vote for if that was general election tomorrow, is the LDP.
Well, yeah.
Right? But what is the actual biggest choice in that poll?
What do you mean? Undecided, right?
Exactly. With like 46%, almost a majority. It's either undecided or other, right? So I asked McCormack regarding this. So if you can have like these gigantic scandals, but they're still apathetic and still support the LDP in spite of all of this, how can you have this sort of optimism? And then McCormack, I could sort of tell that his optimism was a bit sort of weak, but he says that his optimism was an expression of his experience living in Japan and his experience of Japanese people around him. So he could tell that these people he knows and also the people of Okinawa, their actions, they seem that they're quite ready to defend the constitution, that they're quite conscious of the constitution. So yeah, and then he started to talk more about Okinawa rather than the Japanese public in general, which obviously is a part of his area of interest, but wasn't exactly what I was asking for. But still,
Fair enough. Yeah.
So after that,
so Tanbu just put down his notebook. We're going off the top of his dome.
yeah, off dome.
Oh no! Shut up. All right. I'm sorry I said that in the first place.
After
the Q&A session.
After Q&A session, we went downstairs for drinks. I had.
Is that where Frank Man was?
No. This was in Japan House, so still, that was in Yo Sushi. Well, obviously, we weren't going to Yo Sushi. So I had like a glass of orange drink and then some
orange drink.
Yeah, orange drink. So
not juice.
No, juice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then other people were having alcohol and stuff. Whatever.
I'm just trying to refer to the.
So I talked to 3 people. I missed McCormack. I couldn't manage to talk to him, which I'm really beat up about. But I did manage to talk to Stockman. I'll get to him later. So the first person I talked to was someone close to my age, right? He was taller than me, like sort of afro, right? And I could tell from his sort of mannerism, he was sort of how can I say this? He was a bit awkward. Let's put it like that way, right?
Okay.
He asked a question I can't remember. It wasn't about Soka Gakkai, but he was talking with another white guy about Soka Gakkai before I got to him. So it turns out he was a student at SOAS.
Okay.
And yeah, this is the reason why I really enjoyed engaging with him, because I was talking about why he was engaged in Japanese politics. It turned out he was also wanted to know like what party to vote for and stuff like that, and that's why when he went to look at it, he was also confused, and he also wanted more clarification. So that's why he was looking into more Japanese politics. And he said, then we talked about how he was happy that now we had like the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, because the Democratic Party quite recently imploded fucking spectacularly. Like I was just watching that happen. I can't remember when it was going on.
It was like a few months ago, wasn't it?
It was the most hilarious shit, because you have the Democratic Party, right, which is barely distinguishable from the LDP as it is, but then the person who comes in charge of it is known to be someone who's actually for the repeal of the 9th article. So literally the only thing that was like the Democratic Party could be like staunchly against in comparison to LDP. Like their leader wasn't like staunchly against it.
Okay.
Right? He like, rather than addressing it straight away and saying like, this is my view, but my members can hold a different view and I'll respect that and I'll represent it, he just let the problem fester. And then Yuriko Koike, the governor of Tokyo, she left the Democrat Party.
Wasn't she right wing though?
She was right wing. No, yeah. I don't know. I think she left the LDP to create her own party, which is the Party of Hope.
Yes, that was it.
Yeah.
What is it with right wingers now and the fucking stupid splits and new party names? Thinking about
Turkey. Yeah, I know. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
it's the exact same story. It was amazing. But then the Party of Hope imploded even more spectacularly, because Yuriko Koike was at the helm of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what was happening. But essentially now she's not a part of that party anymore. That's just like some old farts. And it's basically an LDP hapatsu outside of the LDP.
Like it's when you go and like make your own. It's like literally going like making your own party, and then like all the uncool kids show up, and then this sucks.
The reason why what the Party of Hope did is that they destabilized the Democratic Party by leeching off the right wing end of the party.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which caused the party to collapse, and then the liberal wing of the Democratic Party said, screw this, we're leaving.
We're creating a new one.
The Constitution of the Democratic Party. It's the CDPJ.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, what this guy said is that he's happy. He was happy that the Constitution Party of Japan's there because they're better. But he did state that he wasn't completely happy with it, right? And then he mentioned that he was much more that the party he does support is the JCP. I was like, yeah. So this guy, he was like, I agree with him so much on pretty much everything. So he was real. He was a real man. And then when I said goodbye to him, he said his name was Makoto. And he's studying SOAS. So like I just love that because he was like,
shout outs to Jack.
Exactly. Because he was. Anyway, whatever.
No, clip that.
Clip that. Whatever.
Alright, so the second person to
talk to was a Japanese guy. I think was a bit older than me. Yeah, definitely older than me. Probably in his 40s.
Wow.
Because like, I'm trying to guess his age, but like, wait, Japanese people are younger than they look. No,
they're older than they look. Yeah. They look younger than they are.
He was obviously not of my age.
Yeah.
But then that probably means I have to add like 20 years. 40 or like 45 something. Anyway, he was talking about. He was interested in what I said about apathy, and I was explaining how, from what I can see about Japanese society, you have the problem with temp workers in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So temp workers, basically, a good way to talk about temp workers is that people who don't have long-term employment
Contracts. Yeah.
So this is opposed to the Japanese dream of having a white-collar job at a company and then being set for life.
Yeah. Not exactly the gig economy, but comparable. Would you say?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So these people usually, sometimes like when you watch like a documentary of people living in cyber cafes, they're usually either unemployed or temp workers.
Yeah.
Right. So no employment benefits, etc. So I was saying like how there's this like large problem because like 30% of the Japanese workforce is temp workers.
Right now?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, 30%. And like, if these people are, like I said, I see this problem with Japanese society, and I see like a solution with more left-wing policies. But then what frustrates me about Japanese politics and what makes me interested in it is that I don't see the Japanese public responding in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we then have to ask what is going on. If they don't respond to this problem, where the answer is obvious. Like if you had that shitty state of workers in the UK with a conservative government, you'd obviously see a shift to Labour, and that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Right, Labour's like a big part of their platform is abolishing 0-hour contracts, which is, quite comparable to temp work in Japan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, what he started saying is that his problem is that in his criticism he was critical of McCormack, but he was saying it in a diplomatic way, because he said as a Japanese person he was unable to see the relationship between the US and Japan as sort of a client state, right? And basically, he explained it as such where it seems that's the logical thing for Japan to do, which obviously makes sense. So he said he compared Stockwin's view to McCormack, and he said he agreed with Stockwin 100%. So he was like, yeah, Stockwin's like exactly what I recognize Japan to be, whereas McCormack is sort of like not different. He said McCormack's thing sounded more to him like a conspiracy rather than like the reality. So
Okay.
like McCormack's like views looks more like US pulling the strings.
I see.
Japan. Whereas
I mean,
Stockwin's view is more like Japan making a rational decision
based on the
circumstances they're in.
yeah.
Right. So from that point, we had a discussion regarding temp work and slash full-time employment. We came to, I think we didn't communicate that well. His English was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I think I just didn't really communicate my views that well, because what he stated a few times was that he said like what he can see happening is that eventually employees in Japan will shift full-time workers to temp workers, because obviously that's the economically rational thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But each time I said I saw a problem with this, he interpreted it to be.
I don't understand the rationale behind it.
Yeah, he interpreted it that way rather than me understanding me saying that. But that's going to be a bad thing to happen. So once I like broke that down, I said, no, I fully understand that that's the economically rational thing to do. But to me, that's like not interesting, right? Because that to me is obvious. Like if you're an employer, you obviously, if you were able to get rid of all your full-time workers or temp workers, you go with that straight away.
Yeah.
But my problem is, what's going to happen to Japan socially, not economically. We then discussed, because my problem is, like, I should have been a bit more outward. Like, I'm actually worried about the welfare of citizens. Like, I just don't want them to be in a bad situation. But I sort of worded that in the way of these, Japanese workers will eventually have to react to this in some way. Whether that's going to be a left-wing reaction or a right-wing reaction, that's something that I can't predict, and something that you almost can't control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
you finally talked with
so I wanted to talk to
McCormack.
So he wasn't at the room, but
was it being mobbed by
no,
by his own friends?
Because I already talked to those two guys for like 30 minutes
each.
Not each, but in total.
Mm.
So McCormack had to go.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah. Like I could have called him.
Anyway.
Yeah.
What's Karel van Wolferen like?
I know. Like because like the thing is, like, McCormack probably agrees with Karel van Wolferen a few points. Like I never know, like Karel van Wolferen.
So what we're looking at right now is Tanbu has the very book you're looking at on the stream, and he's looking at the back cover, which has a few quotes from other writers, other commentators on the back, and the first one is like a full fucking paragraph. It's like 3 paragraphs at the back. It's a man's blurb, right?
Yeah.
The first one
Japan's
is
vassalage to the United States is hard but little understood geopolitical fact of our
I can
times.
read the whole fucking thing.
No, but like that's from Karel van Wolferen.
Yeah.
Damn.
And yeah,
and I talked to
and,
Arthur Stockman. Excuse me.
Yeah, so one thing I just want to mention is that, again, in case people have forgotten, Karel van Wolferen is the Dutch guy who wrote the Enigma of Japanese Power, which is
like 5 times.
which that we're mentioning a lot. Is the book Tanbu's reading, and the one that's really
Professor Gavan McCormack is, well, let me read his qualification. He's the Emeritus Professor of School of Culture, History and Language, College of Asia Pacific, the Australian National University. And the other professor we're talking about is Arthur Stockwin, who is similar research interests and long-time friend of McCormack. So I got to talk with Arthur Stockwin for a while. So the reason why I wanted to talk with him was just to clarify a few points. So stuff about the to changing the electoral system, and also when the executive branch was actually made stronger. But then what did I mention? Yeah, I just talked about why I was interested in politics as well with him, because it was so strange to me. I wish I could remember. Like, let me just think about why I talk. So, just trying to remember the flow of our conversation. So, like, after getting those details, yeah, I think he asked me if I was a graduate student.
Who did?
Stockwin. I know. I'm like, no, not really. I'm just interested in this stuff. I can't remember, but like I was saying, like how it was strange, how the government was strange to me. Like I said, it resembles a liberal democracy, and said like, and Stockwin's like, yeah, I understand, but it really doesn't, because of how one party had power in Japan for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
And then like he asked me, like, you aren't Asian, are you? So like I think somehow he sort of read Asianness in my face. Australians. Anyway. I said no, like I'm Turkish. So then he started mentioning like, yes. So like we started talking about Erdogan. Like I mentioned like yes, he's a bit of a character. Like he laughed, and I said I would probably use a bit stronger language than that. And then I mentioned Karel van Wolferen. He didn't know him.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
Stockwin did not know about Wolferen. But he did have a talk, Canada or somewhere in America, I can't remember, but with a Carol Gluck, right? An American professor, and Carol as in Carol, female.
CRA,
Yeah. Where she compared Shinzo Abe, Modi, and Erdogan, right? And you know, it was a fair comparison, but these were all people who were taking democracies and turning them to more authoritarian states using
democratic
means, but by using the force of religion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So Erdogan with Islam in Turkey, Modi with Hinduism in
India,
and then, but the weak link there is Shinzo Abe with Shintoism, because, like I said this before, Shintoism isn't actually a proper religion in Japan, because Shintoism,
it's kind of a thing.
It's basically folk belief. It's all like folk superstition mixed in. So folk tales, superstition, and some sort of like animist, like actual worship, right? So some of this is mixed in and syncretized with Buddhism, right? But again, that sort of is sort of a marker that in order to have substance, they need to borrow from a religion which is actually organized and codified, right? You had like Buddhist monks sanctifying Shinto statues in Japanese history, which makes very little sense, but it's something that needs to be done in order to give
Shintoism some sort of what's not authority, legitimacy.
Legitimacy, yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. You don't have Japanese people aren't Shinto as religion because it's not actually a religion. It again, like again, saying this from the beginning, it's more superstition. That's it really. Like you go to a temple to do some like fortune telling sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's ritualistic, but it's not something that you incorporate into your everyday life.
Yeah.
Buddhism, on the other hand, it's something that you can actually dedicate your life towards.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to look at like Shinto priests. I need to look into that because there is priesthood and shrine maidens and stuff like that in Shintoism. Well, you have something you have to look at.
Something I want to mention is that the term shrine maidens might be a euphemism because I've been reading the Makioka sisters book, right? And instead of saying shrine maidens, it explicitly says shrine virgins, right?
Yeah, no.
So I don't know about it. I don't know if it's like nuns where you have to be a virgin and not and take a vow of celibacy.
Nuns. I think it's about about girls and young women.
Yeah,
I think because it's not. I think it's not about people giving up sex or like marriage for religious duty. It's more of a age sort of thing.
Yeah. So Stockman mentioned that he talked to Karel Gluck, who mentioned the similarities between Abe, Modi, and Erdogan in trying to authoritarianize a democratic country through the power of religion. Yeah. Shinzo Abe is a weak link in that because Shinto isn't really a religion.
Yeah, but then obviously now, then I pointed out that it's actually the comparison could be widened now and more generalized. So in terms of right wing strongman leaders. So we have Orban. So Stockman mentioned. So I mentioned Putin was sort of a forerunner of these in Russia.
Yeah.
And now you have Erdogan, Modi, and then now you have Orban in Hungary, the new leader of Poland. Stockman mentioned. I was about to mention Orban, Hungary, but Stockman beat me to it. And then I mentioned President Duterte in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So, and then Stockman finally mentioned, and then also Trump and said, yeah, that goes without saying. And I think we quickly wrapped it up after that. I don't know. I talk about how I was studying physics and stuff like that. So I guess I made it clear that this isn't actually sort of an area of study, just an area of interest. And yeah, I also mentioned I'm unemployed. Right? So, yeah, Stockman. Basically saying, yo,
Stockman, help make Japan communist so I can move there, please.
Yeah, I'm unemployed. Give me a job, please.
Give me a job. Please. I will be your researcher. Just give me a stipend, please. Alright. But Stockman sounds pretty safe. He seems like a nice guy. I mean,
he's safe, but he's not. He's
Would you say he's approachable?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. He's calm. He's calm.
What were you going? What?
No.
Why were you humming and hawing?
Because politically, he's milk. Politically, I would say he's milquetoast. Like obviously, he's against these people, these right wingers, but obviously it's a way of saving liberal democracy. But I've got my problem with liberal democracy in the way that it can allow for the excesses of capitalism as long as capitalism markets it well, and then democracy is quite reliant on the media to regulate democracy itself. But it doesn't say anything about large companies are owning the media or something like that, and then that creates another problem where you have the situation that we now are living in, and are close to. In the US, it's becoming more and more of a problem with the Fox owning Sinclair network.
Oh right, the local news networks.
Yeah. And then the same thing happening with 20th Century. They're trying to buy some channels to the UK. I can't remember. No, 20th Century is trying to buy Sky. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, they don't own Sky fully.
Wait, no, you don't mean 20th Century. You mean Sky? No, fuck. News Corp.
News Corp, yeah. They're trying to get. They're trying to take over. I think the regulator passed it. So I think my I obviously haven't asked Stockwin these sort of questions, but I think he obviously would identify this sort of problem, but his solutions would, like I said,
the government recognition.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I think McCormack has a more radical, not radical, but more hard hitting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like again with something he shares with Karel van Wolferen. He's able to go in, right, rather than being a bit more hesitant and being a bit more like he wouldn't say something like, I'm guessing that like Karel van Wolferen, McCormack wouldn't say something sensible for the sake of it sounding sensible. Like if something sounds out there but it's a good explanation of fit for what's going on, he would put that down, right?
I see.
Obviously stuff regarding the Japanese emperor, it does sound a bit sketchy, especially the fact that most people don't agree, and it does seem quite out of character for Hirohito to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll give the book a read.
Yeah.
Especially with the fucking Enigma of Japanese Power. I've been reading a bit. It's just need to finish that book.
How long have you been reading it, man?
2 years now. I don't know. On and off. Like the thing is, I started rereading it like last year.
Okay,
from
so
the very beginning.
Oh, I see.
So because like I left it for a while.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad you came on my show, Tanbu.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. He'll be here again and again. He's living. We live here. It's the same fucking house. So maybe next time
we might find something to talk about.
We might just play Dirt Rally.
We might just play Dirt Rally or
fucking get the fucking steering wheel out. But yeah. I hope someone listens to some of this shit. But yeah, that was a cool talk.
No, it's good to save this as well because some of the stuff I'm putting down my recollections, I haven't noted it down.
Yeah, you haven't noted it down. That's one of the things I was thinking of. Like,
exactly.
Where it would be good to actually look
have a record of
through and have a record of it. So I'm glad we did this, if only for that. But yeah, so we're really smart people. I'm glad you listened to us. No one had any questions, so I guess we communicated all of our ideas incredibly clearly,
concisely. Welcome. Amazing communication. Excuse me.
Yeah, we did it.
Oh yeah, and was at the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation. I don't think I mentioned.
Oh
that.
yeah, yes, of course.
Yeah.
So yes, it was an event organized by the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Association, right?
Yeah,
And
I'm definitely going to go to more of their events.
yeah, check them out on Facebook if you live in London, right?
Yeah.
Do they do anything outside of London?
I don't know.
Well, yeah, just if you're in the UK, check them out, but they'll probably only do shit in London. It's SOAS territory, I guess. So
yeah,
yeah, I appreciate anyone that comes around and watches this either live or in the VOD. Please, I don't know. Oh yeah, hit. If you wanna ask Tanbu something, I guess. Do you mind if I share your Twitter handle?
just go crazy.
Yeah, right. So that's at Tanbu
_GG.
Yeah, there you go. So if you want to send anything if you want to ask any question about Japanese politics to this guy, he probably
wouldn't know.
He wouldn't know because he doesn't live there. He just reads the news articles.
I have been like following the news as well.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But like he's got some like if you've got like questions about like the modern social structure of Japan to a certain degree in a very broad strokes kind of thing that doesn't really require you to like. Most Japanese people go to Daiso to buy their shit. Like not like that, but more like how are power structures in Japan or some shit like that. Like ask Tanbu. He might quote some nice shit.
Like of all the things that got outdated in Enigma of Japanese power, so the cultural explanations I think are still very relevant because stuff like the influence of corporations on family life and education and family life. I don't think they've changed. Giving the cabinet more, giving the executive branch more power and more influence hasn't really actually changed that.
Yeah, there you go. So, ask them some questions about those kinds of topics if you want to, or hit them up for like fighting game talk, I guess. Anything.
I'm not shit for fighting.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not only because you haven't played. Like you've got an interest at the very least.
I don't know.
Got strong opinions. Do not hit me up on Twitter. And that's it. I'm glad you guys came around. I'm just gonna put the intermission on now because I just need to promote this fucking tweet again by Tanbu. Again, this the sort of shit, this the sort of quality content you'll be getting if you follow Tanbu on Twitter. Look at this amazing fucking joke. Can you read it out? Considering you're here now, I don't have to read it out now, do I?
Yeah.
Do it.
I love my backbone. I'm all about the vertebrate life. Ninth edition by F. Harvey Poe, Christine M. Janis, and John B. Heisen.
Published by Pearson. Alright. That was... Holy shit!
Almost 2 hours.
No, good. This is just past the 2-year anniversary of that tweet.
Whoa.
We started streaming on the 2-year anniversary of that tweet. Can you fucking believe that? 11:53 p.m. We've been streaming for 1 hour 51. It's now 1:20 a.m. At some point, we streamed exactly 2 years to the anniversary of that.
I'm clipping this.
Yeah. All right. So.
That's excellent.
I'm hype. I'm really glad that we actually opened that up and realized that. 5th June 2016. Now it's 6th June 2018. We started this stream on 5th June 2018. So it's been 2 years since this fantastic tweet. Still only like 1 retweet, 1 like. Like you've retweeted it yourself a bit, so it's like technically it's 2, but it's technically 1.
Okay.
I want people to fucking notice this tweet. I'm so mad that you never pinned it. Did you pin it?
No, I didn't pin it.
Like the JFE stuff was funny.
Yeah, it was.
Other than that,
but I unpinned it. It's specifically because of this Japanese politics stuff. I didn't want to make a nice a well-rounded Japanese political take. Someone to click on my profile. No, I'm a JV shooter. That was an excellent tweet. It was very good. I had it rattling around in my head for a while. And then it came to fruition. It was perfect. I wanted to be regarding that JV tweet, I wanted it to be Tony Blair twice, but having Tony Blair and then David Cameron was also a good thing because like to change in
Tastes.
not change change in taste by changing in the action video I was uploading.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I'm glad we went from a conversation about Japan to JV.
To JV tweets.
Yeah. That's what we're about here in the stream in this house.
Just the widest range of interests.
We never stop going in balls deep. All right. Okay. So this is Tide Ocean signing off.
I'm gonna sleep.
All right. Me too.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right. See you guys later.
Bye bye.
Bye.